Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with another edition of Charts with Dan, and we have a lot to get to this week, starting with a disappointing second weekend for the Fantastic Four First Steps. So let's jump right into the past weekend at the box office. And when the actuals came in, Fantastic Four brought in $38.6 million in its second weekend of release. That equates to a 67.1% drop from its opening weekend. On the show last week, we broke down the numbers and I said that there were indications that there could be a steep drop-off in weekend number 2, certainly steeper than we saw with Superman just a few weeks ago, and that is exactly what we saw. And I think that what this says, and we're going to dive deeper into the numbers for this weekend in a couple minutes, but I think what this says is that Marvel is still able to turn out the base for their bigger films. We didn't see a huge drop-off as far as the opening weekend gross, but that seems to be a bigger and bigger part of the audience. It seems more and more people aren't going in weekend number 2 and forward because they've lost interest in the movies, because they're waiting to see it on Disney+. And this is something that Marvel is going to have to address, because with this one and Thunderbolts, it's not a quality issue. Both of those movies were well received by critics, generally well received by audiences, but I think that this goes down to the major question for the MCU right now, which is how can they rebuild that relationship they have with the audience so that people aren't waiting to go see it at home, so that more people are going to see it a second time, or can that be done? I think that those questions are being asked right now by Kevin Feige and the people over at Disney. In second place is The Bad Guys 2, which opened just under $22 million, $21.9 million. I picked this as one of my top 10 summer movies, but it's going to have to really leg out if it wants to make that list, and also outperform some other movies in August that are getting a lot of buzz right now. In third place was The Naked Gun, which opens to $16.8 million. Not a terrible opening. We'll see again how this legs out, what the word of mouth is. Critical response was very positive, and August is pretty clear as far as competitors for this specific audience in this type of movie. Superman in its fourth week drops 44.8% and brings in another $13.7 million. It is now at $316 million. It's actually right behind Jurassic World Rebirth, which is the number 5 movie. It dropped 33.6%, and it's at $317.6 million. So within the next day or two, Superman is going to pass Jurassic World Rebirth domestically. In sixth place was Together, which brought in $6.7 million for the weekend, although it opened on Wednesday, so its total gross is now at $10.8 million. F1, the movie, still hanging around the top 10. It brought in another $4.1 million. It's now at $173.3 million. I Know What You Did Last Summer drops another 50% in weekend number 3. It's now brought in just under $30 million. The Smurfs, also in its third weekend, has a steeper drop. It dropped 66.9%. It's at $28.5 million. And How to Train Your Dragon spends an 8th week in the top 10. It brought in another $1.3 million. Its total right now is at $260.3 million domestically. Dropping out of the top 10, we have Eddington, which is out after just 2 weeks, and then 2 smaller films that spent 1 week in the top 10, the Indian film Sayara and the indie film Oh Hi. And when we look at the longest runs in the top 10 so far this year, Sinners and Lilo and Stitch are tied with 9 weeks, followed by 5 movies right now that all have had 8 weeks in the top 10. A Minecraft movie, Dog Man, Captain America Brave New World, Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning, and now How to Train Your Dragon. If How to Train Your Dragon could spend 1 more week in the top 10, it would tie Sinners and Lilo and Stitch, but that is a pretty tall order because we have a couple of new releases that are hitting theaters on Friday. Looking at the biggest theater count changes this past weekend, Eddington lost about 1,500 of its theaters, about 75% of its total theater count. That is, I think, the 6th largest number as far as most theaters lost in one weekend. The largest by far still for this year is the Alto Nights. I don't know if you remember that one. It lost about 2,500 theaters in its third weekend. It basically went out of release in 2 weeks. The Smurfs lost 1,209 theaters. It's still in 2,295. I Know What You Did Last Summer lost 903 theaters. It's in over 2,300. How to Train Your Dragon lost 887 theaters. It's still in 1,459. And losing about 60% of its theaters was the Pete Davidson film The Home. It lost 603 theaters. It's still in 412. This is what I like to call our road to recovery, although that name gets more and more optimistic with every passing week. The red line is the box office weekend average for 2021 to 2024. The blue line is the average for 2015 to 2019. And that dotted black line is every weekend this year. And Fantastic Four not performing well in its second weekend means we pretty much performed this past weekend about how we have been since theaters reopened. There is some good news, though, which is that if you look where the red line is, I think that with Freakier Friday and Weapons opening this weekend and some other movies continuing to play out, we have a shot at maybe exceeding our post-pandemic average and maybe even getting above that blue line if both of those new movies really break out. So we'll see what happens. There have been plenty of weeks this year where I thought maybe we'd get above average, and we didn't end up doing that. Looking outside the U.S. market to the top films internationally, all movies outside of the U.S. and Canada, at number one was the Chinese film Dead to Rights, which had a 94.2% increase in business from its first full weekend in theaters, $82.3 million. The Fantastic Four First Steps also did not have an impressive hold internationally. It dropped 60.4% and brought in $39.6 million. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle continues to really perform well in Japan. It lost 21.4% from last weekend, but brought in another $17.3 million. F1 the movie continues its pattern of strong international holds. It dropped just 14% for a $17.2 million weekend. And The Bad Guys 2 rounds out the top five at $16.3 million. When you take the international grosses, you combine them with our domestic grosses, we get our top five films worldwide, and Dead to Rights is the number one movie in the world at $82.3 million and a $208 million worldwide average. Again, that is mostly, almost exclusively, Chinese money there. The Fantastic Four First Steps had an overall 64% drop worldwide from weekend number one, bringing in $78.2 million. It's now at $367.4 million. The Bad Guys 2 brought in $38.3 million in its first weekend worldwide. It's at $44.4 overall globally. The Naked Gun brought in $28.3 million in its first weekend. And this is interesting. On the initial top 10, looking at box office estimates, Superman was the number 5 movie worldwide. But when I crunched the numbers with the actual domestic numbers, Jurassic World Rebirth actually edged it out by about $10,000 to be the number 5 movie worldwide this past weekend at $24.9 million. Superman is just behind it, but again, it just goes to show you that Superman is much stronger domestically than it is internationally, the fact that it is now out of the top 5 worldwide. So let's break down these second weekend numbers for the Fantastic Four First Steps, and we'll look first of all at the second weekend drops for movies that are in the MCU. The Fantastic Four First Steps is in green there, and the pattern is pretty easy to pick up because all of the movies that are in orange have been movies released by the MCU post-2020, basically post-Endgame. And the Fantastic Four falls right into the same pattern with Eternals, with Wakanda Forever, with Multiverse of Madness, Spider-Man No Way Home, Love and Thunder, Black Widow, Captain America Brave New World, Quantumania, The Marvels. Now, No Way Home and Wakanda Forever were holiday releases, and they were actually pretty substantial box office hits. So even though they fall into this big drop pattern, they were actual financial successes. But only 4 MCU films that have been released after Endgame, basically, or post-2020, have had drops below 60%. Thunderbolts, which had a good second weekend but was not a financial success, Deadpool and Wolverine, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is a pattern that's been established for a while. Fantastic Four is just falling into that same pattern, and I think what it tells you, as I said before, is it's not about quality. This is about how people feel about the MCU, how urgent it seems to go see those movies, and that is what the franchise is lacking right now. What sets it apart from Superman, both movies aren't doing particularly well internationally, but what sets it apart from Superman is Superman's staying power and strength domestically. We just aren't seeing that from the MCU, and that to me says that there is a disconnect between the MCU and the public right now. This waiting around for the glory days to return may not happen. It may just be that the MCU has to adjust expectations. Now, we're going into a big phase for them with Avengers Doomsday and a new Spider-Man movie coming out, so it is possible for them to get that mojo back, but this idea of using new franchises, new characters to recapture the public's love the way that they did in Phase 1, that's just not coming to pass. This is the franchise tracker for the MCU domestically. These are the top 35 films because there are so many now that they don't all fit on one screen. Right now, The Fantastic Four First Steps is the 29th highest grossing MCU movie domestically. It has moved ahead of Thunderbolts. It's going to bypass Captain America Brave New World, Thor the Dark World, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and we'll see how high it goes up this chart, but it's not going to be in the first two columns, absolutely. It's not going to get up to that $400 million range. I don't really know if it's going to get up to the $300 million range. We'll see what it does over the next few weeks. And when you look at the MCU adjusted for inflation domestically, the Fantastic Four First Steps is number 34 out of the 35 movies on this list. It's moved past Eternals, which is good, but it is still catching up with Incredible Hulk, Black Widow, the first Ant-Man film. If it tops out around $275, $300 million, then it'll be around Ant-Man and the Wasp, Thor the Dark World numbers, and I don't think that those are the numbers that Marvel wanted with this, especially with a marquee group like the Fantastic Four entering the MCU. Looking at it as far as worldwide gross, Fantastic Four is now 35 on the list. Again, there are a couple of movies behind it. It'll soon pass Captain America the First Avenger and Black Widow and Thunderbolts. But if it can get to that $500 million mark, it'll be right around the Quantumania range. I mean, a little bit better than Quantumania, but again, not this big resurgence for the MCU. And really, it's kind of a double whammy here because the MCU not only is having domestic problems, it's also having international problems. The good news for the Fantastic Four First Steps is that it is now officially the highest grossing Fantastic Four film at $197.1 million. That puts it ahead of Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Fant4stic. Although when you adjust for inflation, First Steps is number 3. It's about $10 million behind Rise of the Silver Surfer and about $65 million behind the first Fantastic Four movie. So it's got a little bit more work to do if it wants to be number 1 on this chart as well. So that's where Fantastic Four is. Let's talk a little bit more about Superman. And I've seen some people saying, why do you have to pit these two up against each other? I'm not saying that these two movies should be enemies, but it is interesting to compare their performances because they both came out in the same month. They're both major comic book movies from the two major names, Marvel and DC, and they both have similar goals, this idea of winning audiences back, reintroducing new characters. But Superman has been more successful so far than Fantastic Four has, and it's going to be more successful. Let's face it, this is where Superman stands as far as the franchise tracker for all Superman branded films. Right now, it is past Man of Steel at number 2 on this list, and it's only about $14 million behind Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. So it looks like it's going to go down in the record books as the highest grossing Superman film domestically. When you adjust for inflation, it is at number 6. It's about $11 million behind Superman Returns, and it's got a lot of work to do if it wants to catch up with both Superman 2 and Man of Steel. I don't see it getting up to Man of Steel's adjusted gross, but it is going to pass Superman Returns. And it's interesting when I talk about adjusting for inflation because there has always been a contingent, and I know that there's some other analysts that feel this way as well, that say that adjusting for inflation is useless because of population growth, because of the changing the viewing habits and how people watch movies. And what I've always said is that, yes, there is no perfect metric for you to adjust that can put everything on an equal ground. It's really just something to add context. It's a way to kind of even the playing field historically without taking in all of those other factors. But there has been a huge uptick in people that are really pushing against this adjusting for inflation thing since Superman released. And my suspicion is that it's people that are fans of this Superman, of James Gunn's Superman, that think that I and other box office analysts are using it as a way to deflate the performance of the film. And I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I can certainly speak for myself when I say that's not what I'm doing here. What I'm doing is just putting it a little bit into context. But it is interesting that, this thing that I've been doing on the show that a lot of people have been doing for so long is suddenly now so offensive to people because it might counteract a narrative around a movie that you like, when really I think what I and a lot of box office analysts are doing when we adjust for inflation is just looking to add context. It's not an attack or anything that's used to discredit something, at least not on my part. Looking at the all-time highest grossing DC films, unadjusted for inflation, Superman is now at number 9. That puts Man of Steel in 10th place, and Superman looks like it is going to pass Suicide Squad as well as Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, Aquaman, Joker. It could get up to the Batman levels again if you don't adjust for inflation. So there is still some movement for Superman to do on this chart as well. And how is it that Superman got to the point where it could pass Man of Steel and get close to passing Batman v Superman? Well, it's what we've been talking about the last couple weeks: longevity. This is the box office trajectory of Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Superman. Man of Steel is in blue, Batman v Superman is in black, and Superman is in red. And again, this isn't a measure of profitability. This is a measure of longevity. And you can see that Superman started off basically even with Man of Steel, way behind Batman v Superman, but because it has done better weekend to weekend as far as the drop-offs, it's held more of an audience weekend to weekend, it has gained on those films over now 24 days of release. And if this pattern holds, then it is absolutely going to make more than Batman v Superman because it has already pulled ahead of it on a day-to-day basis. And we see this as well with how it's performed against Fantastic Four. When you look at those first 3 days, the two movies had very similar performances. But as the days go on, and especially when you get into days 8, 9, and 10, which are this past weekend, you can see the strength of longevity. The fact that Superman held so much better in its second weekend at the box office, and where those two lines separate. And that's why I say many times, and I will keep saying on the show, it is not just about the opening weekend. It's about weekend 2, weekend 3, etc. That's what determines how a movie is going to perform. And speaking of performance, I wanted to return to something that we talked a little bit about last week on the show, which is the profitability chart for Superman. I did an experiment last week where I looked only at whether the movie was going to make its budget back, and I eliminated the marketing costs from the equation, and I solicited your input, and I would say pretty overwhelmingly, all of you said that you would prefer to see my calculations with the marketing included, even though that is just an estimate. So I've gone back and I've calculated the numbers and updated them, and I made some adjustments to the graphic as well. So this is the latest profitability estimate for Superman. Again, this is bringing in all of the shares from different markets, from its different weekends, and these are, as I say, just estimates. So the budget for the film, $225 million. Several sources have cited $125 million as the marketing or advertising budget for the film. Right now, it's made $551.3 million in gross worldwide profit. I estimate a net of $265.6 million. It's a bigger share because it's a domestic-heavy movie. Against costs of $350 million, that means I estimate that, yes, Superman has made its budget back at the box office, but no, it has not turned a theatrical profit. I have it $84.3 million in the red, and I added a little bit of a disclaimer, a bit more of a disclaimer at the bottom, because I've seen sometimes people will take a screenshot of this and then kind of share it without context, and people will come back at me saying, well, wait a minute, he's not even including ancillaries, he's not even including product tie-ins, etc. Yes, I know. That's not what this chart is. This is a chart about theatrical profit. Is the movie making a profit based solely on worldwide ticket sales? I understand that there are ancillary forms of revenue, and that's why I've said about numbers like this. Yes, it says $84 million away from making a theatrical profit. That's not a terrible result for this film because it was so tied in and had so many promotion deals. This is absolutely a movie that is eventually going to make a profit for Warner Brothers. It's probably going to make a fairly nice profit. It's not going to be a monster hit, and I'm sure the studio, if they'd been given their absolute preference, would have preferred a monster hit, but it's not going to be a money loser either. If a studio can get a film to within a close shot of profitability, and that's where Superman's going to end up eventually. I don't think it's going to be profitable in the theatrical window, again, just based on ticket sales, but it's going to be close. The tie-ins, the streaming revenues, digital rentals, etc., are going to take it into profitability. The best case scenario, obviously, for a movie is for it to get in the green just on ticket sales, because that means everything else is extra. For me, looking at the numbers, I think that Warner Brothers is probably satisfied with the performance of the film. It is not going to cost them money. And I think that really what it's going to be is a foundation upon which to build the rest of this universe. If the stakes were that if this movie failed, that the DCU was in trouble, I think the result with Superman is that there is now a base to build on, but it is not an overwhelming success. There's still work to do. There were some other movies in theaters this weekend. Let's look at where this latest iteration of The Naked Gun stands, along with the rest of the movies in the franchise. These are the Naked Gun films by domestic opening. The top opening film was The Naked Gun 2.5, The Smell of Fear, back in 1991. It opened to $20.8 million. 2025's Naked Gun, though, comes in second at $16.8 million. That's ahead of the opening of The Naked Gun 33 1/3 at $13.2 million, and the original film back in December of 1988 at $9.3 million. Although when you adjust for inflation, The Naked Gun 2.5, The Smell of Fear is still at number one with a $49.1 million opening. The Naked Gun 33 1/3 comes in second place at $28.6 million, followed by the original Naked Gun at $25.3 million, and then 2025's version at $16.8 million. And I think the trajectory of that, where you have The Naked Gun opening at $25.3 million, again adjusted for inflation, and the sequel basically doubling that, that's the power of home video. That's a movie that some people saw in theaters and enjoyed, but a lot of other people rented. And when the sequel came out, they showed up to see it in theaters. And I think that is what is missing from the box office right now. I also mentioned Together, which had a 3-day total that was just outside the top 5. But for the distributor of the film, Neon, it is already one of their 10 highest grossing films. It comes in above Apollo 11 and below 3 Identical Strangers, which, by the way, are 2 outstanding documentaries. Neon is just now moving into this big wide release segment of their life as a company where they put movies out in wide release right away. So it's not surprising that Together makes this list. A24 has already sort of taken this process as well. If Together can double its opening few days, then it could get right around where Anora is, which of course is the reigning Best Picture winner, at $20.4 million, and could potentially crack the top 5 for Neon. So despite the big drop, the Fantastic Four: First Steps did spend a second weekend at the top of the charts, although I think it is very questionable whether it's going to spend a third weekend at number 1. But my Charts with Dan trivia question this week is, what MCU film has spent the most weekends at number 1 on the domestic box office chart? I will give you a hint. It is more than 2 weeks, and I'll give you a second hint. They don't necessarily have to be consecutive weeks at number 1. I'll give you just a second to think about it. Pause if you don't know the answer. And here comes the answer to the question. It is Spider-Man: No Way Home, which spent 6 weekends at number 1, although they were non-consecutive weekends. Scream, the relaunch of the horror franchise, came in and took the number 1 spot for a weekend, but Spider-Man: No Way Home came back and took that number 1 spot from Scream. If you're talking about the longest consecutive weekend streak, that would be 5 weekends, and that record is held by both Black Panther and Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. But you may be saying that trivia question was a little bit too easy, so I came up with a bonus trivia question for this week. Fantastic Four has spent 2 weekends at number 1, but how many MCU films have spent just 1 week at number 1 domestically? So one and done when it comes to being the top film at the box office. Again, I'll give you a second to think. Pause the video if you need to, but here comes the answer. The answer is 6. Captain America: The First Avenger, The Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man: Homecoming, which might surprise some people, but that was a very competitive summer of 2017. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Black Widow, and The Marvels are the 6 MCU films that have been number 1 for 1 week and then moved down the box office chart. And last week I asked members here on the channel about the future of Marvel and DC. I said, should they be more worried or less worried about the future than they were at the start of the summer? I think these results would be different if I took the poll again this week. 18% of people who replied said that Marvel and DC should be more worried. 37% said they should be less worried, and 45% took the, I think, very sensible position of saying that it is too soon to tell whether they should be more or less worried. And my question for members this week also concerns the future, but it's not a poll, so you'll have to go to the member post on YouTube and answer in the comments below that post. The question is, what will the highest grossing movie of August be domestically? From August 1st till the end of the month, counting only revenue that was earned in the month of August, what will the highest earning movie be? You can leave your pick in the comments in the member poll, or you can upvote your favorite, and then the 5 picks with the most upvotes will be revealed next week. And just for your reference, these are a few movies that'll be releasing in theaters or are already in theaters. So if you think that the remainder of the run for the Fantastic Four First Steps, again starting on August 1st, will be the top grossing movie of the month, you can answer that. The Bad Guys 2 also opened this past weekend along with The Naked Gun. But we have some new movies entering the fray. Weapons, Freakier Friday, The Roses, Caught Stealing, Nobody 2. Do you think that one of those movies will be a breakout hit and out-earn some of the legacy July releases? Let me know in that member poll. And if you're not yet a member here on the channel, you can go down to the description below. There should be a link for you to click, or depending on how you're watching this video, you could just click a button that says become a member. So if you're not a member yet, I'd love to have you become a member here on the channel, and I can hear what you think about these questions each and every week. These are what I call our specialty charts, and we will start with the top per theater averages from this past weekend. At number 1 was the Fantastic Four First Steps, which brought in $9,381 per theater in its over 4,000 theaters. In second place is a movie called Night of the Juggler, which I'd actually never heard of. There's a 4K restoration of the film. It's a 1980 movie starring James Brolin as a former cop trying to find his missing daughter. It basically sounds like 80s Taken. In third place is Soleiman's Story with $5,747 per theater in 2 theaters. This is a movie that debuted at the Cannes Film Festival last year. It's about a young immigrant from Guinea trying to obtain French citizenship, and it was nominated for Best Film at the French Oscars, or the Césars, and took home 4 awards. So that is an acclaimed and award-winning film. In fourth place was The Bad Guys 2 with $5,710 per theater in 3,852 theaters. And in fifth place was the Indian film Chalmira Putt 4 at $5,444 per theater in 180 theaters. And Chalmira Putt 4 was the #1 film in limited release, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer, bringing in $979,980. In second place is another film from India, Sayara, which brought in $777,000. And in third place, another film from India called Kingdom, which brought in $482,000. In fourth place was Cat Video Fest 2025, which brought in about $450,000 in 199 theaters. Just a bunch of cat videos. Watch them and be happy. And in fifth place was Oh Hi, which was in 323 theaters and brought in $199,000. A movie that is not on this chart is Sorry Baby, which I think is one of the best movies of the year. A24 got the rights to the movie. They rolled it out glacially slow. The most theaters it was in was last weekend at about 300 theaters, and it started contracting already this past weekend. So it looks like the biggest release that movie is going to have is in 300 theaters. If it's playing near you, I think you should probably go see it now, because odds are you're not going to be able to see it in the near future. And this is a real disappointment to me, because I think that Sorry Baby is a really, really good movie. It is not a broad appeal movie. I'm not necessarily saying they should have opened it on 1,000 screens in its first weekend, but to see it pick up so few screens at such a slow pace and now already be disappearing from theaters, it just kind of feels like that movie wasn't given a chance. Let's take a look at the summer box office for this year so far. Lilo and Stitch is #1 domestically at $421.2 million. Again, unless one of these August movies is a massive surprise breakout hit, Lilo and Stitch is going to be the #1 movie of the summer. Jurassic World Rebirth is #2 for now, but Superman is going to pass it very soon to become #2 and drop Jurassic World Rebirth down to #3. How to Train Your Dragon is currently at #4. The Fantastic Four First Steps moves up 4 spots from last week. It's now the 5th highest grossing movie of the summer. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, Thunderbolts, F1 the movie, and Final Destination Bloodlines all moved down 1 spot, and Elio is still clinging on to the domestic summer top 10 by its fingernails with $72.5 million. And looking at my predictions versus the actual box office so far, the one thing I think it's safe to say that I got right, and this is famous last words, is picking Lilo and Stitch as the #1 movie of the summer. I was somewhat wrong to a degree, more or less, about just about everything else. I picked How to Train Your Dragon second place. It's currently in fourth place. I picked Superman in third place. It could be up in second place. I picked Fantastic Four at number 4. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, number 5. It's currently number 6. I picked F1 at number 7. It's currently number 8. Thunderbolts at number 8. It's currently number 7. I picked Elio number 9. It's at number 10 right now. And The Bad Guys 2 I picked as the 10th highest grossing movie of the summer. I'm pretty shaky on that pick now because the opening wasn't impressive enough for me to confidently say that a movie like Weapons or Freakier Friday isn't going to make this list. So I think it is now likely that I will have 2 of my top 10 be incorrect picks. But I'm generally happy, except for that underestimation on Jurassic World, I'm generally happy with my picks otherwise. This is the domestic box office so far this year. A Minecraft movie is still maintaining the slimmest of leads to be the highest grossing movie of the year so far, over Lilo and Stitch at $421.2 million. But I'm going to go ahead and predict what's going to happen this upcoming weekend. With Freakier Friday getting released, it's a big Disney release. I could see Disney attaching Lilo and Stitch to Freakier Friday for drive-in theater showings, which would boost the takings for Lilo and Stitch substantially over where they have been. And when the movie's only about $2.7 million behind a Minecraft movie for number 1, I could see that being enough to make it the highest grossing film domestically of the year. Is it a bit of a dirty trick? It absolutely is, but Disney has done it before, and I think they're going to do everything they possibly can to get Lilo and Stitch in that number 1 spot. Jurassic World Rebirth, right now the number 3 highest grossing movie of the year. Again, Superman will soon pass it. Sinners is at number 5, followed by How to Train Your Dragon and Captain America Brave New Worlds. The Fantastic Four, First Steps, enters the top 10 overall at number 8 with some room to grow. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning and Thunderbolts both drop down a spot, and F1 the movie is off the domestic top 10 for the year thus far. This is the worldwide box office for 2025. Of course, Ne Zha 2 way out in the lead at $2.2 billion. Lilo and Stitch currently still the only Hollywood movie to break $1 billion thus far in 2025. A Minecraft movie in third place. Jurassic World Rebirth is now at $766.8 million worldwide, followed by How to Train Your Dragon at $618.5 million. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning's at $594.2 million, although Superman is gaining fast. It's at $551.3 million. That drops F1 the movie down to number 8. Detective Chinatown 1900 is at number 9, followed by Captain America: Brave New World. So that's what's going on at the box office. Let's take a look now at the world of streaming, and Netflix had a movie with its own blockbuster debut this past week, Happy Gilmore 2, which was number 1 for the week of July 21st through the 27th, with an estimated 46.74 million views in just its first few days of release. Netflix also said, but they did not give a specific number, that it was the biggest opening for a movie in the United States as far as people that watched it ever. But they don't break out numbers individually by country, so we don't know exactly how many people in the US watched it. But still, Happy Gilmore 2, a massive opening for Netflix. But look at K-pop Demon Hunters. I think its numbers went up from the previous week. It's at number 2 at $26.33 million. It continues to be an absolute phenomenon, putting up numbers and a performance that we don't ever see on Netflix as far as how much it's maintained its popularity week to week. Untamed, which has been a hit of its own, brought in 26.12 million views in its second week. That's a new Netflix original series. The original Happy Gilmore movie got a boost from Happy Gilmore 2's debut. It brought in 11.42 million views to rank number 4 on the chart. At number 5 is Amy Bradley is Missing. At number 6, one of the most descriptive movie titles I can remember, Lost on a Mountain in Maine. That brought in 7.78 million views. Right behind it is the Netflix movie Wall to Wall at 7.77 million. Then we have the Netflix original movie Brick at number 8, the Netflix original A Normal Woman at number 9 at 6.65 million views, and the Netflix original Almost Family at number 10 at 6.08 million views. And as far as movie debuts this year, again, this is global numbers, Happy Gilmore 2 came in just behind the first weekend of Back in Action. Back in Action debuted to 46.79 million views. Happy Gilmore 2 debuted to 46.74 million views. So close to being the top movie debut of the year globally. And looking at overall performance, so whether a movie is debuting or not, Happy Gilmore 2 had the fourth best performance for a movie this year, behind the matching week 1 and week 2 performance of Back in Action, both coming in at 46.79 million views, and also behind Straw's second week. Straw brought in 48.89 million views in its second week of release. Let's see if Happy Gilmore 2 can match that number or match what Back in Action did. The first week of Exterritorial rounds out this chart at 38.33 million views. Let's take a look now at the latest data from Nielsen. Now, these numbers are delayed by about a month, and they are also domestic numbers only, not global numbers like the Netflix numbers we just looked at. So these are the most watched movies for June 30th through July 6th, which of course includes the July 4th holiday here in the US. At number 1 was the Amazon Prime original movie Heads of State with 18.3 million hours watched. Netflix is The Old Guard 2, which also debuted that week, comes in behind at 16 million hours watched. Then we have K-pop Demon Hunters continuing its run at 12 million hours watched. Sinners debuted on Max the week of July 4th, and it comes in 4th place at 9.25 million hours watched, with a Minecraft movie in 5th place, and then a bunch of new movies rounding out the top 10. Grown Ups 2 at number 6, The Hitman's Bodyguard at number 7, Independence Day, that makes sense, at number 8, The Old Guard at number 9, and Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. So both movies in the franchise making the top 10 at number 10. And when we look at the top U.S. streaming movie debuts this year by hours watched, Heads of State has the 5th best debut that we've seen on the Nielsen charts this year at 18.3 million hours watched, coming in behind The Electric State, The Accountant 2, Back in Action, and Moana 2, which has the biggest premiere for a movie this year so far, again, according to Nielsen. These were the most watched streaming shows for June 30th through July 6th. Squid Game continues its run at number 1 as its third season really had its first full week of availability at 47.8 million hours watched. Love Island USA, a strong second at 28.2 million hours watched, followed by 2 library series, Animal Kingdom and Blind Spot. The Bear on Hulu moves up into the top 5 at 14.8 million hours watched, followed by Bluey and The Waterfront. SpongeBob SquarePants and Criminal Minds return to the top 10 chart, and Ginny and Georgia rounds out the top 10. When we look at the top streaming shows on Nielsen by watch time per available episode, so that's basically total watch time by number of episodes available to watch, Squid Game leads the way with 2.17 million hours of watch time per episode over 22 episodes. It's not just the latest season, it is the series as a whole. Countdown is at number 2. This is a new original series at 1.7 million hours watched per episode, followed by The Waterfront and Ironheart. Ironheart's in 4th place at 1.49 million hours watched per episode as it rolled out its final 3 of 6 episodes. We Were Liars is at number 5. The Sandman is at number 6. The Bears at number 7. Ginny and George is at number 8. Animal Kingdom is at number 9. And The Ultimatum, Queer Love, rounds out the top 10 at 318,000 hours watched per episode. And that wraps it up for streaming news and box office news this week. Before I go, though, I just wanted to give you a heads up on some stuff that you might enjoy watching in theaters and at home this upcoming week. First of all, today, on Tuesday, Jurassic World Rebirth is available for digital sale and premium video on demand. Those are those higher-priced 48-hour rentals. And if you're a fan of Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, which I very much am, a new 4K Blu-ray disc is available to purchase today. So if you want to own Master and Commander on 4K, and I'm going to have to look into this, you can purchase that today. Tomorrow, appropriately on Wednesday, Season 2 Part 1 debuts on Netflix. This is just the first 4 episodes of Season 2. You'll have to wait till early September for the second 4 so that Netflix can get in another billing cycle. Also debuting on Wednesday is The Pickup, an original movie on Amazon Prime. Eddie Murphy and Pete Davidson are 2 armored car drivers who get mixed up in a heist led by Keke Palmer. The Pickup is directed by Tim Story, who also directed the first couple of Fantastic Four movies that we were talking about earlier. Also on Wednesday in theaters, getting a jump on the weekend, is a movie called Sketch, which is opening from Angel Studios. Early reviews on this movie have been positive. It's about a young girl's sketchbook drawings who magically come to life. This Thursday, The Monkey, which was a horror hit earlier this year, is available to watch on Hulu if you missed it in theaters or you just want to watch it again. And then on Friday, we have a couple big movies opening. First of all, from Disney, we have Freakier Friday with Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis returning. And then also on Friday, one of my most anticipated movies of the year, Weapons, from Zach Kreger, the director of Barbarian. I'm going to try to see this movie on Thursday afternoon if I can, and maybe get a review out on Thursday evening. I'm very upset Warner Brothers is not doing any advanced screenings anywhere near me. It's basically just in New York and LA and some other markets, but none of the markets within 5 to 6 hours drive from me that I have access to. So I have to wait till it comes out. And if there was a movie I really wanted to be able to see early and talk about early, it was this one. But keep an eye out here on the channel Thursday evening for my review of Weapons. In limited release this upcoming weekend is My Mother's Wedding, which is co-written and directed by Kristen Scott Thomas. I believe it's her first ever feature film, who also plays the mother in the title. Scarlett Johansson, Sienna Miller, and Emily Beecham play her daughters. Also in limited release is the documentary It's Never Over, Jeff Buckley, which premiered at Sundance. It's about musician Jeff Buckley, whose life was tragically cut short in a drowning, and it's from Oscar-nominated filmmaker Amy Berg. And then for people that want to watch something new at home, Clown in a Cornfield, which had a theatrical run earlier this year, makes its debut Friday on Shudder, and Freaky Tales makes its debut on HBO Max. And that's all I've got for you this week, but stay tuned here on the channel. As I mentioned, I'll have my review of Weapons. I'm probably also going to check out Freakier Friday. If I have thoughts about it, I'll share them. And you never know, a movie like War of the Worlds could pop up. If you haven't seen it's not really a review, it's really just sort of sharing my trauma around that movie here on the channel, then you can check that out right now. Thank you, though, most especially for watching this video. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell so you're notified when I upload a new video. And until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.